Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for the Nintendo Switch. I really adore the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise. I may not be the biggest fan of the series out there, as I still haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles X, but I really loved the first game. I even beat it on the Switch, and the definitive edition was my game of the year for 2020. I tried to play Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but it really confused me with its field skills, and this may be stupid of me to admit, but I couldn't figure out how to give Pyra her favorite food to upgrade her enough to continue. And from what I've heard, the game doesn't get any better with its field skills. Not to mention that it has so much ludicrous amounts of fan service and women's bodies being ridiculously disproportionate to how they would actually be. So I was really glad to hear that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was a standalone experience, and I did not have to have knowledge of the previous two games to enjoy it. And I'd like to say that the advertisers who made that claim were absolutely right. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 does not require prior knowledge of either of the previous games. I guess you could say you could liken it to the Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy series, where they usually have a new universe in each game. That being said, there are some really amazing callbacks to the previous games, especially near the end. So longtime fans will get a few chuckles at some of the lore revelations and a few design choices, such as Noah's sword looking a lot like the Monado. Now, if you haven't played a Xenoblade Chronicles game, these are action RPGs where you wander around these really huge landscapes that often have these towering vistas, and as you run across the enemies, you fight them in real time while using the control pad and the buttons to use what's called arts, which are basically your special moves. Now, some arts are more effective when you're on certain sides of the enemy. So there's a little arrow indicator that tells you which side of the enemy you're facing. So if, for example, you're trying to face the enemy from behind, it'll be facing a downward arrow when you're in the right direction. And that's about all you really need to know about the combat system. Is just press the buttons when the icon flashes, and make sure to stay within the appropriate rings that the support units set up so that you can heal yourself in the green ring, increase your defense in the orange ring, etc. The game does try to introduce new mechanics to you as it goes along, which I think makes this much more accessible than most Xenoblade Chronicles games are. The other games have quite a lot of menus and confusing mechanics that you have to wrap your mind around. This game kinda does that, but it goes a lot slower. And not only that, but you can change the difficulty. So if you're playing on the easiest difficulty, some of its new systems you can just completely ignore. The affinity chart, for example, that's been around since the first game, that allows you to check relationships between the characters, I didn't even bother looking at, as it was just so unimportant and confusing. So you are given the freedom to customize this game to a relative degree. Speaking of customization, one of the coolest parts of the original Xenoblade Chronicles was being able to change your characters' outfits. And that's only sort of the case in this entry, as you can swap outfits between the characters, and at one point the characters also find new clothes lying around. But you don't have nearly as much flexibility as you did in the previous games. Now, the good news is that this is a much more traditional story, so you won't have to worry about the insane amounts of fan service of either of the two previous games. In fact, men and women are treated very much as equals in this universe, and I found it to be a welcome change of pace where so many women are so sexualized. But then there's a very early scene in this game where there's a mixed bath for men and women, and they're not even fazed about it. They don't make perverted jokes, they don't ogle at each other, they just treat each other like they're equals. In fact, if the game didn't keep reminding me of the characters' genders, I was almost half tempted to think that they didn't have genders. That was how equally they were treated. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a very beautiful game, and it's a lot of fun to explore. The environments often have lots of stuff going on in the background, which has been a staple of the franchise since it started, and it especially delivers in the production values. Monolith Soft actually got the funds to have a full orchestra this time around, and most of the songs are performed by the Tokyo Symphony Orchestra and with real instruments, and it sounds beautiful. I'm definitely hoping that I can listen to this soundtrack on YouTube sometime. As, man, some of those tunes, there's just so many of them, and the game didn't bother including an in-game soundtrack player, so it's a good thing there are options for those of us that wish to relive the auditory moments. The voice acting is another huge highlight. I know fans were kind of mixed on their opinions of Xenoblade Chronicles 2's acting, but I think in this game they wanted to say, let's see if we can outdo Adam Howden and his gang from the first game. And I'd like to think they did a fantastic job. At first, some of the voice actors blended together a little bit, like they didn't stand out as much as the cast of Xenoblade 1 did. But once I got used to them, and once the more poignant story moments started happening, I started really appreciating their unique talents, especially the guy that played Noah. Like, man, he actually may give Adam Howden some serious competition, and that is saying something. One thing that I didn't like about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was that it had a general theme of interruptions. And I think that's a good way of summarizing pretty much everything that was wrong about the game, is the game didn't seem to flow nicely. Like, you'd be hearing this sweeping, amazing orchestral music for the environment, and then an enemy would interrupt you, and it would get into these obnoxiously loud guitar pieces, and you'd be like, oh, come on, I'm getting taken out of the musical atmosphere here. Not only that, but every time you pause the game, there's this ambient piano synth track that plays, and it's a nice tune and all that, but in the previous games, you would still be able to hear the background music when you paused the game. Now, you have to pause the game a lot because the characters can switch classes after a certain point. So you're constantly having this piano music interrupting the action, and it also plays whenever you're looking at the map to fast travel. If only there was an option to just keep the background music playing, then I don't think I'd have much of a problem with it. Another major issue I had near the end of the game was that the camera controls started getting a bit weird. For most of the game, they're totally fine, but near the end, it felt like the camera just got way too close to the main character, and I tried going into the options menu and adjusting this, but nothing I did seemed to help. And then when I went back and captured footage for this review, the camera was totally fine. So I wonder if that's just a late game bug, or if it's a problem only I had. Like, let me know what you guys think, because I certainly wouldn't want to knock this game down a peg just because of an unfortunate accident in the camera department. That being said, the horizontal movement of the camera is spectacular, and you're even allowed to adjust the options. Now, the options in this game are for the most part pretty generous. You have the ability to mix and match how much music and how much voice acting you want, but for some reason it doesn't really work with the sounds. I tried turning everything down except for the music, and even though it succeeded on getting rid of the voice acting and the battle cries, there were still sound effects playing when I was proof watching and editing this footage. There's also a very weird omission of the ability to select what kind of voice acting you want. In Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, you could choose to turn off the battle cries that the characters do, but still have them voice things in cutscenes. That's not available. It's either voice acting or not in this game. Now, despite my nitpicks, I don't want you guys to think that this is a bad game by any means. Sure, the game often doesn't know how to keep its flow, and there are definitely moments, especially once you get to the final area, where the game really drags. Like, this is to have some of the longest cutscenes I have ever seen in a game. But the payoff is that you get these wonderful environments to explore, and you also get some very touching story moments. There were times where I nearly wanted to cry. It was so beautiful. And I bet if I ever do a Catholic review of this game, I'll have a lot of very positive things to say about this game's overall message of friendship and being positive about families. It has a very pro-life kind of meaning to it and really encourages seeing reality as it is, which is so unfortunate in such a postmodern era. And the music was amazing, the voice acting was incredible, and for longtime fans of the first game like me, if you can consider ever since 2020 being long time, I really appreciated the nice little callbacks and some hints toward the future of the series. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments if I missed anything and if you'd like things to be clarified. Before I go, I'd like to give an epic shout out to Matthew Rakowski, who is my top tier patron, as well as my other patrons, Splatcat, Sploon Ghost, and Scooter Doodle, for also supporting me. The Patreon link will be in the description, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!